Welcome to the Healing Hour. I am your host, Athena Rodriguez, and we'll be having some healing conversations. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's segment of the Healing Hour podcast. Today, we'll be talking about all things attachment style. So, attachment styles show up in every way in our relationships. It shows up in our romantic relationships, it shows up in our platonic relationship, and it shows up in our familial relationships as well. Why is it important to learn your attachment style? To see how you're showing up, to be able to identify your attachment style and see what you need to heal about yourself in order to fully show up present for yourself and others. So, there are 4 different attachment styles, which we'll be diving into in this episode. And those attachment styles are your secure attachment, your anxious attachment, your avoidant attachment, and your disorganized attachment, also referred to as fearful avoidance sometimes. And these 4 attachments show up in everyone in different ways. It's also very important to figure out what your attachment style is when you're in relationship with someone else. Because 2 conflicting attachment styles, you can see how that would be a problem in a relationship. If I'm a secure attachment and I'm dating someone who is anxious attachment, you may very well be driving away your soulmate by being in your own way and not being able to assess your toxic traits. So, besties, this is how we are able to identify how we show up. I'll also be dropping a link in the comments of attachment style quiz so you can figure out what attachment style is you think best suits you, or identify which which attachment style you're identifying with the most. Okay, had to spit that out. And again, I don't think there's a right way to be in a relationship, as every relationship is put on in our lives to teach us something different about ourselves and about the world. So I don't think that there's necessarily any bad relationships. All relationships are learning experiences, even the ones that are okay. There are crappy relationships. There's relationships that hurt you. There's relationships that harm you. But there are also relationships that, when they hurt you, elevate you spiritually as well, because you're out there seeking the tools that you need to heal yourself. So, one thing that's helped me in my attachment style is to first identify what it is, and really just critique myself, in a positive, constructive way, of course, um, in figuring out how we're going to uh, tweak things, not change it, but tweak things to make us and our partners comfortable. So that brings us to our next segment. Let's now identify what attachment style you are. So, as I said, there are 4 attachment styles. We have 1, your secure attachment, your anxious attachment, your avoidant attachment, and your disorganized, or often referred to as fearful avoidant, um, attachment style. So, your secure attachment style, let's call her the peaceful princess. Let's call the secure attachment the girl who's grounded, she's grown, she communicates her needs without spiraling, she sets firm boundaries in who she is. She is secure not only in herself, but in the attachment. The secure attachment bestie is the girl who knows exactly what she brings to the table and is never afraid to get up and walk away from the table when things aren't aligned. And I'm not talking about your nitpicky friend who's going to get up and leave the restaurant um, on her date because she doesn't like how he's dressed. No, this girl is so secure in herself to where she knows exactly what she wants. And before we even get to the dating stage, she's able to vet and pick out what she does and doesn't like. She's not rude, she's not nitpicky. It either aligns or it doesn't. This girl trusts easily and wisely. So she's able to not just shut herself off from love. Because I think a lot of times we associate boundaries with just saying no, when a lot of times boundaries are also how to say yes, right? So, how to accept love and also how to give it. So, in addition to saying no, she knows how to say yes to the right things that is suited for her. She trusts easily because when people betray her trust, she knows that there is always someone else around the corner that can pick it up. She can be close in intimacy, but she can also be independent. She can be emotionally open, but she can also be by herself and not need another person. There's also uh, a confidence in her that prevents her from overthinking. For example, you're sending out a text message, you don't get a reply. It's been 5 hours. What do? Are you going to A, blow his phone up, B, take twice as long to respond to him as he does you, or 3, you go ahead and you're finding something else to do, whether that be hanging out with friends, whether that be working on your podcast, whether that whatever that may be. And she knows internally that his response time, his response period has nothing to do on her own self-worth. So she's able to go about and not get a text back and her day is not affected at all. She picks partners that matches her energy. So that's another component we have to talk about when we're talking attachment, because people link up on a vibrational level. You're going to attract not what you want, but you're going to attract what you are. And not to say you're going to attract the same thing as what you are, but you're going to flow on the same level plane as the people you're in attachment to. And how we know that is when people fall off from your life, usually it's right before your glow up. Usually it's right when or right after, and you realize that you guys aren't clicking on a vibrational level. So people that you're attached to at the time of attachment are on your frequency. So we got to think about that, right? So the secure attachment bestie, she doesn't have to uh give you a laundry list of her non-negotiables. She's carrying herself in a way that she's attracting other very confident, very secure partners. So, yeah, so think soft life, think healed. When we think about her, we're thinking healthy love, we're thinking glow, we're thinking a girl who doesn't let relationships make or break her. That is our secure attachment bestie. Now we have our anxious attachment bestie, who we love so much, and we're constantly reassuring her in the group text that everything's going to be okay. This is your girlfriend who is the overthinking romantic. Yes, we all have one. We may even be one. We may have evolved from being one. So let's identify her. This girl loves love. She loves love. Usually, these girls are always in love with something, with someone. And she's usually very terrified that one day it'll just disappear. So she holds on excessively tight to whoever she's partnered with in order to prevent that. So a lot of times she will overextend herself. A lot of times she will do things that she doesn't want to do just to keep that attachment going. She's constantly in a state of stress. That text message that we were talking about, she's constantly checking her phone. She's constantly checking her phone to see if he has texted back. If he hasn't, she's checking his social media. She's having a conference call with her friends, trying to figure out what they think the cause may be. And that's her anxious. She sounds like, did I do something wrong? Do you think he's mad at something I did? Did he lose interest in me? She's constantly seeking reassurance. Constantly, constantly. She gets attached way too quickly, right? So your anxious attachment girly is going to get attached to things that are more so abstract ideas rather than solid action. So instead of having a relationship where her partner is genuinely thinking of her beforehand, doing acts of service, performing his love languages and hers, she's going ahead and constantly telling you or explaining herself, right? These are the girls who are constantly explaining to you why you should like her boyfriend or why you should like her situationship. So these go into your, well, he does this and he may seem like a bad guy, but you don't know him. He's really a good guy underneath all the shitty things he's done. Or even though he doesn't make me feel loved and cared for, he has all of these really good qualities, right? So these are your apologists. They're constantly apologizing for the on behalf of the man that they're talking to. Because if you're on the other spectrum of the attachment styles as her friend, you're looking at her and wondering, why haven't you left already? Like, usually the anxious attachments are the ones attached to abstract ideas, right? They're attached to the feeling, right? They're attached to the chaos in the chase. So they're constantly in fight or flight in love. They're always mistaking intensity for intimacy. So when things are really tense, when the arguments are flowing, when there's high drama, they're confusing that for love, right? And so that's something that we can all relate to, is confusing passion and love. But the secure attachment girly knows the difference between a fiery encounter and this doesn't align with me. I actually want a calm, secure, peaceful attachment. Um, and they're just, yeah, you'll be able to spot your anxious attachment friends because they're usually never chilling in relationship. Every time you call them, they're constantly telling you or having a story about whatever the last guy did or the guy that she's talking to. Well, he did this today, he did that today. If you notice, your other attachment girlies may not bring up relationship as much as your anxious attachment girlies. Usually, with the anxious attachment girlies, this becomes their identity, right? Their relationships become their source of self-worth. So let's move on to on the other end of the spectrum, we have your avoidant attachments. That's your ice queen with soft core, right? These are one of your most misunderstood attachment styles. And I think avoidants get a lot of flack because, I mean, we all know what avoidant means, right? They flee from tough conversations, they flee from hard commitments. So they're usually dubbed as heartless and cold, but that really stems from a place of most of the time from trauma itself. So these people are usually your hard shell people who are just protecting themselves from being open. And so this manifests as your Miss I don't need anyone. This manifests as somebody who will probably hit up that sneaky link at 2 in the morning and tell herself it's just a hookup. It's nothing more, it's just a hookup, right? But at the end of the day, they'll still crave attachment, healthy attachment. And how they see that is by not getting attached. So they confuse the lack thereof of connection with healthy connection. So she tends to be emotionally distant. She tends to look at things in a more logical, brain based perspective as opposed to in an open heart space perspective. And she may be the one who is rolling her eyes at the anxious and disorganized attachment girlies. She may be the one telling them to get their get back, get their get back out there. She's Miss, she'll ghost when things get too real. And she'll be unbothered on the outside, but on the inside she's still craving that secure connection. And the fourth and funniest one to me, this is the most interesting attachment style to me, and that's the fearful avoidant disorganized attachment style. So this is our chaos queen bestie. And our chaos queen bestie is she's kind of like a mix between all the connection styles, right? That's why we're called disorganized, because it fluctuates, right? There's no real consistency in her attachment style. So she's kind of all over the place when it comes to her attachment style. She doesn't trust love, but she wants love. She is afraid of jumping into commitment, but she wants a commitment. And she'll chase someone 1 second and then completely fall back the next. And it sounds like, why do I always attract people who hurt me? Why am I always attracting bad people? But then these are the same people who don't let those bad people go, okay? These are the people who will hold on to toxic attachments. But they're able to psychoanalyze themselves and realize that, yeah, maybe I'm being a little anxious, and they'll pull away, right? But they'll still fall back in old patterns. Um, it's usually a lot of like hot and cold energy in those relationships, but there's in the back of their mind, they always have this fear of abandonment and this fear of intimacy. So that's why when they'll probably go all in and then pull all out at the same time. And so these tend to be people who sabotage connections for themselves. Even if the connections actually feel good, they'll actually sit there and they'll pull back, right? Um and so I say they, but I think throughout my journey in relationship, I think I've embodied all four attachment styles, right? And I think that just goes to um you know who we're around and who we're in connection with. Because if you're an anxious attachment and, you're dating somebody with a secure attachment, you may find yourself exhibiting more signs of being secure. That's if you're self aware, right? That's if you know that this is my attachment style. I'm not going to let my past traumas affect my current relationship, right? So in that case, the runner can be the chaser and the chaser can be a runner. You can be an avoidant to one partner and have a partner that triggers that anxious attachment, that chase in you. And then you can have one partner that you're actually not feeling them that much. And you start to get avoidant, and with John, you were anxiously attached to him, and then With Joe, you're not so attached. You're kind of just treating him, how you treat him, and you're dragging him along. And I think it all just depends on the energy that you're aligned. We're able to, be insecure attachment styles, right? Because that is the goal, right? Is to stay in that secure attachment sweet spot, right? So how we do that? How do we do that? How do we do this? Um, a little personal bit about my life. When I started first in partnerships, when I first started to commit to relationships, I started off as an anxious attachment, okay? I was in a constant state of chaos and a constant state of disappointment, right? And as I grew up and I started to advance in in relationships and get a little older, I started to find myself in an avoidant attachment space, right? And getting into these real ego-based relationships where intuitively I know that I'm not going to be able to give myself without hurting myself, because anxious attachment people, I'm going to argue, are the most sensitive people, right? And that's why they're guarding their feelings so hard, and they're terrified of getting hurt. That's why they put on that rough exterior of I don't care, right? The nonchalance will chalant in the right circumstances. I'll tell you that much. And I've also been fearful avoidant. I've also been the back and forth, I know better, but I'm not doing better friend. And lastly, I've been in insecure attachment, right? I've been in attachment where I've had to pick up the slack for my partner in a emotional maturity level and really just buckle down. So of all these attachment styles, I think all of our goals is to hit that secure box. And we do that by grounding ourselves, right? And one thing that everyone will tell you when you are asking about relationship advice, what is one thing everyone always tells you? Girl, you gotta love on yourself. Put you first. Be alone for a while. Be alone for a while. It wasn't until a therapy session that I had that really put things in perspective. The only way to get good at things is to constantly try them. So the only way that you can really master relationships is to literally be in relationship, because everything else is just theory, right? Everything else is reading your self-help books. Everything else is journaling. Everything else is, you actually have to be in connection, because people don't act according to textbook. You have so many people who are such a mix of styles, such a mix of, you can't put these people in a box. So you have to grow in relationship. And so that's my biggest advice, when you're trying to grow out of anxious attachment, when you're trying to grow out of avoidant attachment or disorganized, is to go ahead and just put your foot in there, right? Because each of our relationships teach us so many different things. So the first step is grounding yourself, right? It's not to say that self-love is not crucial to how you show up in relationship. In fact, it's everything in how we show up in relationship. How confident we are is how confident we show up, as below, so above. Whatever we're feeling on the inside is going to manifest in the 3D. So the more we are, you know, grounded in ourselves, right? Because even when we're still working on ourselves, we still deserve love, you know? We always hear your homegirl's advice is always going to be love yourself first. Okay, we still deserve love while we're working on loving ourselves more, right? So we do that by grounding ourselves. We do that by deep reflection. So grounding yourself looks like meditation and journaling, right? It looks like reflecting on our past experiences and figuring out how that works, and figuring out where we went wrong and figuring out what we did right, and figuring out what we're never going to do again. Because one thing you don't want to do is keep repeating those lessons, girl. And so after we hit the grounding phase, right? We're going to go ahead and, once we are on stable ground, we already have confidence in ourselves to where we don't think of ourselves as inferior to our partner, right? Because that's where this all boils down to, is to see your partner as an equal, right? When you're seeing your partner as superior to you start looking at them like the prize, right? It should be two prizes. It should be two prizes. You should both be assets. When you start looking at them like the prize, or you start looking at them like they're beneath you, that's where the attachment styles get a little funny, right? But when you have two secure people, you're bound to have a secure attachment in a healthy, long-lasting relationship. Because not all lasting relationships are healthy. Let's go there, right? Not all healthy relationships are in fact healthy. But every relationship is here to teach us something. So after we ground ourselves, after we vibrationally link up to who we are meant to be with, right? How do we change this? How do we change the narrative? If that's what you want, if you want to carry on healthy relationships, how do we change the narrative? And that all starts with open communication, right? A lot of these attachment styles have to do with a lack of communication with your partner. You'll sit there and tell your girlfriends everything about the relationship. And you'll ask your girlfriend, well, did you communicate how you feel to him, or are you just venting to me? If the answer is just venting to me, you need to hang up the phone with me, call your partner, and figure that out, right? That's how we're doing our serious, secure, healthy connections from now on, okay? We're not getting our girlfriends involved. All we're going to do is get unwanted advice, and they're just going to hate your partner. Because if you're constantly just complaining about them, either you got to be that secure attachment girl that you have to know when to leave, right? Because if you're constantly coming back with stories, you need to know, like, this is my boundary, this is how I'm fixing it. Not to say that you can't talk a little mess with your homegirls. I'm not saying that. But monitor how often you're doing that, right? And so after we do that, then we're able to really just see at a personal level, where is this attachment stemming from? Does it stem from our absent parent? Does it stem from the person who broke up with us in the 8th grade? Does it stem from seeing your mom go through trauma? How does this show up in you? And let's find the source of that and really heal that, so that way you're not bleeding onto your partner, right? And all that's to say, we are constantly evolving. We are constantly working through this thing called life. And the best part about life is connection. The best part of life is connection. It's connection with our family. It's connection with our friends, with our spouses. That's what makes life worth living. So let's make sure we are doing that in the healthiest way possible, because what did Lauryn Hill say? You can't win if you ain't right within. And the best way to do that is to just foster a happy home with happy people.